Kinfolk, what is good? It's your girl Ken, and I welcome you to another episode of the Keys and Seeds podcast. This was supposed to be episode 34, but this is episode 33. If you know, you know. As many of you all know, or if you noticed, or if you didn't know or noticed, I did not release an episode the week before last as I was supposed to. However, if you are subscribed to my newsletter, you would have known beforehand that I was not going to release an episode, and you also would have known why. And so I say that to say, if you are not already subscribed to my newsletter, pause this episode right now, go over to my new website, might I add, and subscribe to the newsletter, keysexceeds.com. All I need is your email, and it is really just my way of beginning to form and cultivate an intentional community. I want to know who all is really on this journey with me, supporting me, and would love to be kept in the loop of all of what I'm doing and all of what I have going on. So yeah, with that said, I didn't release an episode the week before last, and I didn't want to tell social media because I feel like I should be able to communicate those type of things directly to those who are in community with me. And if it was up to me, I would not be on social media. Like, if I did not have to be on social media promoting my brand and pushing, you know, this content that I'm producing, like, I would not be on social media. But here we are. If you are tuning in visually, this location is a new location, but I am working on securing a dedicated space to use to record and film for the podcast, and prayerfully soon we will have that space secured. But that's something very small. Also, I have been saying since the beginning of this podcast that I am going to have intentional conversations surrounding my discography as an artist. I have been wanting to do a dive into all of the music that I have released up until this point, and I have yet to do that. And I even told y'all, I even said that in the next episode, I said this after the last episode that I dropped, I said in the next episode we gonna talk about where I'm at right now as an artist. And yeah, because if you know, you know, I briefly took all of my music off of streaming, and then I re-uploaded it, but I didn't re-upload everything, and people act like I didn't just drop a single in September. Because I've been as consistent with this podcast as I've been, and I've been slowing down on the music, people have been wondering and questioning whether or not I still make music. When, yes, y'all, I still make music, all right? And I'm grateful. I'm grateful, one, for those who have been following my journey as a musician, and, you know, is asking, you know, like, girl, are you gonna be dropping some music soon? Like, I'm grateful that people are still checking for me in that regard, and people support me in that regard. But I also too want to say thank you to those of you who have been following me on this new journey I've been embarking on as a podcaster, because I am expanding my resume. But I say all of that to say, before diving into what this episode will be about, as you can tell by the title, I am going to reflect on my year with y'all. In the next episode, starting next episode, as we are entering into a new year, it will also be a new podcast season, and I have intentionally taken the time to plan out what each episode for the year 2025 will be. And 2025's podcast season will be a deep dive into my discography. I promise you. Starting with the next episode, we are going to have a proper introduction. I'm going to give y'all an update regarding where I am as an artist specifically, and I am very excited. I really am. I am so excited. But this is this episode, and again, I really just wanted to reflect on my 2024 with y'all. Ironically, the episode following the episode that I was supposed to release, right, the following Tuesday just so happened to fall on December 31st. And I did not want to close out this year without sharing with y'all just a transparent reflection on what 2024 has been like for me personally. And so, yeah, if you are here tuning in, if you're tuning in audibly, thank you. If you are not, or if you haven't already, please be sure to leave a rating and a review on your favorite podcast app. That helps a lot. But also, too, this podcast is visual. So if you are just listening to my voice, please meet me over on YouTube. And if you are here on YouTube, if you are not already, subscribe and meet me in the comments as we are reflecting on 2024. I want to know what y'all 2024 was like. What is a highlight of your year? What is a lesson that you learned that you are carrying with you into 2025? What is your favorite episode of mine, of this podcast, that you have tuned into? Like, what episode did I release this year is your favorite? Do you have a favorite episode from this year? What episode was the most impactful for you? I would love to know. Prayerfully, this podcast has been of value to you in your life. And if you are here tuning in, then this podcast has been a part of your year in some capacity, unless you're here in 2025 and you're new here. And if you are new here, hey, I talk about my journey of growing in my faith, growing and healing emotionally, and I also talk about my growth as an artist. I make music, if you do not know. Faith, healing, and artistry. So yeah, I think that's all I have. Okay, yeah, so boom, jumping into this episode, what has 2024 been like for me? Where do I start? I have notes on my phone, but I don't want to just like read the notes. I feel like pretty much like I know what this year has been like for me. But what's funny is I had to intentionally take the time to reflect on my year. I do a lot of journaling, and I do a lot of intentional documenting throughout my year, so that at the end of the year, I can be able to reflect back on what exactly happened on March 8th. You feel me? Like, because sometimes you'll get to the end of the year and you don't remember every last detail, but I do a pretty good job at documenting my year. And so I was able to go back on what I documented so that I could, bring back to my memory what this year has been like for me. But prior to me intentionally sitting down and reflecting on all of what I documented, like just reflecting on what this year has been like off the top of my head, if I'm being completely honest with you, other than me being consistent and showing up for this podcast, I could not tell you what 2024 was like for me. Like, off the top of my head, just recalling what this year has been like for me, it was really hard for me to remember what all happened this year. And it was hard for me to remember what my 2024 was, because if I'm being completely honest, I have been coming to a place of realizing that I place a lot of my value and my worth in my work and the things that I do, the output that I am producing, right? And so typically when I reflect on my years, I reflect on like my wins and my accomplishments that were able to be perceived, like my outward like works and accomplishments, right? But this year for me was very different because, again, although I was very consistent in showing up for this podcast, and there were wins and accomplishments that I had this year that were outward, and like I had output that others could validate me in, right? Like I did have those moments. However, this year was a year of me going deeper internally, and so it was different for me to realize that this year was not necessarily defined by my output or my work, and like sometimes it's hard for me to articulate my thoughts, but I pray that I'm making sense. I feel like this year was more so just me slowing down from having those outward wins and accomplishments, although I did have those here and there, like I said. And this year was more so just about me going deeper within myself and in my relationship with God. And I say that to say that here at the end of 2024, I've grown and I've matured both spiritually and emotionally. And I am not at all the same person that I was at the top of this year. And I think that's the goal, right? Like, none of us should be the same person that we were at the top of a year, at the beginning of a year. I mean, at the end of a year, right? Like if you are at the end of a year, you should be able to reflect back on that year and recognize that who you were at the beginning of that year was a completely different person. And so I can say that I've definitely grown. I've definitely matured. But again, this year was more so just going deeper within myself, going deeper within my relationship with God. And that was my goal. My goal was to grow closer to God, right? But as I've been growing closer to God, as I've been walking more intentionally with God, I've been able to recognize the fact that the relationship that you have with God and the relationship that you have with yourself, they go hand in hand. Like they are not separate. You cannot have one without the other. And so as I told myself at the top of this year that I wanted to grow closer to God, I don't think I necessarily knew what exactly I was asking for. But I will say that 2024 was the first year that I decided to have a theme for my year. And so my theme for 2024 was becoming her. And my definition of that, my intentions with having that theme as my theme for my year, right? Becoming her to me meant becoming her as in the version of myself that God has called me to be, the version of myself that God sees me as, right? And I had great intentions, right? And, that more so stemmed from a place of knowing that 2024 was actually the year where I met the milestone of walking more intentionally with God for a year. Meaning, to give context, in 2023, I gave God my yes, and I told myself, okay, I'm going to start intentionally walking with God, right? Prior to that point in 2023, I was very double-minded. I've shared my testimony here and there. This is not necessarily like the episode for that, but just to provide context, right? And I've been very transparent throughout my music, specifically about me wrestling with my faith, right? And so in 2023, I more so just reached the end of myself, essentially. And God was like, it's either me or it's whatever else you've been choosing, right? Bible in one hand, tarot cards in the other hand, right? And, I'm realizing that, I've been down a path of deception and, being full of pride, trying to control everything in my life. And I'm realizing the decisions that I'm making are not very wise decisions, because now I'm in a place in my life where I don't like where I am. And so in 2023, I'm like, okay, God, I'm going to intentionally try to do this your way. Like, I'm going to back up. I'm going to take my hands off of everything. Like, you let me know what you want me to do. Right. And so that was the place that I was in 2023. And so I went into 2024 with this idea of becoming her, essentially me desiring to become the version of myself that God sees me as, right? Because a lot of us, we see a version of ourselves that we desire to be. We have a version of our life, that we desire to have, but I don't think a lot of us intentionally seek out what God wants for us, right? And so that was more so my intentions at the top of 2024. And so again, I had great intentions. However, I had a bunch of unrealistic expectations. And so as someone who tends to define their worth and their value in, their work and, their output, right? I'm telling myself, I'm finna start eating healthier. I'm finna start exercising more. I'm finna start waking up at 5 a.m. Like, I have all of these, great ideas, right? Like, I'm about to start, releasing these limiting beliefs and let go of all of these bad habits. Like, I had great intentions, but essentially now at the end of the year, I'm realizing like, girl, you was trying to do a whole 180 overnight, and you are not going to do a complete 180 in 1 year. Like, be for real. I tried though. I tried. And so I say all of that to say, although I had all of these, ideas of, showing up more for myself and, just all of the things, like, it's time to grow up. It's time to, you feel me, put my big girl panties on it. Yeah, right. But like, this year really has just been a year of me first just sitting with the fact that I don't love myself as much as I should. I don't show up for myself as much as I should. And me just confronting the why of that, if that makes sense, right? Like, I've been in this place of realizing I don't actually trust God as much as I say that I do. Why is that? Why do I have these limiting beliefs? Why do I fear both failure and success? And so that's pretty much just the energy that I've been in this entire year, literally. And just to be even more specific, and I have a list of like wins and accomplishments and like highlights that I really want to share with y'all. But so yeah, we'll end this episode, on that lighter note. But like, for right now, this is kind of, the heavy stuff. Like, I remember specifically at the beginning of 2024, I kind of had an identity crisis. And obviously, as we go through life, right, this journey of life, right, there's no set destination. We're going to continue to grow and evolve and, mature and become better versions of ourselves, right? I never want to sound as if I'm, reaching a place of, I know it all. That's not my goal at all, right? But at the top of this year, I went through this transitional phase where it was so scary, because I'm like, I don't know who I am. And how do I not know who I am? And I'm 25. In 2023, I turned 2025. Child, in 2023, I turned 2025. In 2023, I turned 25. And so in this year, 2024, I turned 26. And when they say that little frontal lobe be kicking in, baby, the day of my 25th birthday, Amazon dropped that off at my front door. And it was like everything just clicked. And so navigating through your 20s is very interesting, right? Because I know that I'm too young to have everything figured out, and I never will have everything figured out. Like, I know that, but like, I'm also too at a place where I'm like, I'm not still in high school. College was how many years ago? 4, 5 years ago, right? Like, I'm in the middle of my 20s, right? Like, I'm growing closer towards being 30 than I am closer to being 20, right? And so I kind of just been in this place of just navigating, knowing that it's time to grow up and mature in real ways, right? Like, can you really sit with yourself? Can you face yourself? Do you like who you are? And I was at a place of realizing I don't know who I am. And as someone who is a recovering codependent, a recovering people pleaser, right? That was scary for me to like face and realize I don't really know who I am, because as bad as it may sound, like, I shapeshift in a lot of ways, right? Like, I can be, or attempt to be, I try to be, whoever other people desire for me to be, right? But like, I never really took the time to intentionally sit with myself and ask myself, who am I? What do I like? What do I want? Right? And then too, like, when you're in this place of intentionally surrendering your life to God in exchange for the life that He wants you to live, it also puts you in this vulnerable place of, okay, so like, I'm trying to surrender and be who you want me to be, God, but like, also too, like, I feel like you're, wanting me to have more confidence in who you've called me to be, and I don't know who that is. And I remember when I gave God my yes in 2023, at that time, I was still heavily pursuing music, and I was also starting up this podcast. But I remember God told me to walk away from both. And so I'm like, okay. And then eventually God told me to start showing back up for this podcast, which is why you guys have been seeing me be as consistent as I've been in showing up for this podcast, because it's what God called me back to, and it's what He wanted me to build. But if I'm being honest, when He told me to show up for this podcast, that's all I heard. And because I didn't hear anything regarding the music, I went through this grieving process of not knowing if it was just for a season or if God completely wanted me to stop pursuing music. And again, that was something that I had to grieve, because I genuinely have a love and a passion for music. But if I'm also being honest, it wasn't until I stepped away from the music where I realized, aside from my identity as a musician, as an artist, I don't actually know who I am as a person. And it wasn't until I stepped away from the music and I took a step back where I then realized that I was actually placing a lot of my identity within that in an unhealthy way. And because I have received a lot of validation from pursuing music, it was as if, as a person, right, like, if I was not performing in that way, I felt as if I didn't have value. And like, that's the best way I can like put that into words. And I didn't realize that about myself until I slowed down and I took a step back, and I realized, wow, like, again, just aside from me being an artist and, me, producing art, right? Like, if I'm not doing that, who am I? And I didn't have an answer to that question, if I'm being honest. And so me showing up for this podcast has also just been a journey of me not only growing in my faith, but just growing in my relationship with myself. And I've been sharing that with y'all in real time. And so again, like I pray that the content that I've been producing with this podcast has been of value, because I know it's been of value to me. But yeah, so this year has been, just a year of me just sitting more with myself, going deeper within myself as I'm going deeper in my relationship with God, addressing limiting beliefs that I have, just insecurities and just all of the things. So yeah, and I also put in my notes, now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know if it was an Instagram live or if it was just a video that was just shared on their Instagram, but shout out to Murdoch, because there was a very specific video that he posted on his Instagram in November of 2023. I literally put it in my notes. I had to go scrolling through his page. November of 2023, he posted this video where essentially he was talking about Black leaders achieving success before being developed, and how sometimes the success that one achieves does not always match the development of that person. And that resonated with me so much. And then he said, when those two things don't match, eventually the perfect quote unquote leader will break down. And I feel like that was something that I kind of like went through and experienced, because I have achieved a lot as an artist, right? Like, of course, I'm not where I would like to be personally as a musician and as an artist, but I understand now that it was an act of God's grace that I am not even further. But I mention that because, again, I have seen a fair amount of success as an artist up until this point. However, it wasn't until I took a step back where I realized I still needed internal development. And again, I'm grateful for God's grace that a lot of things that I thought that I wanted didn't work out. And I'm grateful that, I am still at a place where I have the opportunity to slow down and take a step back and, really continue to develop as an individual, because I know that my output from this point moving forward, it is coming from a healthy place, and it is coming from a place of me being rooted in knowing who I am and knowing who I am in Christ. And so that was just something that I also felt led to share. Also too, like I was going through this very real phase of having fear of moving backwards, because when you truly have an encounter with God and you're at a place of really being locked in with God, and you think back on what he delivered you from and what he pulled you from, I don't know about anybody else, but it makes me emotional. And when I look back on my past, I'm like, I genuinely do not want to go back to any of it. And I remember, as I started to lean into these nudges and, I'm feeling the grace for, pursuing music start to lift. And, now the grace is shifting. You know what I mean? I'm in my head thinking is this just a phase? Am I tripping? I was wrestling with those type of thoughts too. And now a year later, I can say confidently that it's not a phase. I am grateful to know God for myself. I am at a place of receiving an abundance of revelations regarding God's vision for myself and, my life. And I know that I've been receiving downloads and, all of the things that I myself did not conjure up in my mind, and so it's not a phase. And, I'm just grateful for the growth that I have had, both spiritually and emotionally. And I don't want to feel like I'm repeating myself. So, yeah. I'm just grateful to just have a more secure foundation, spiritually, emotionally, all of the things. And so now, as we wrap this up, and I am checking to see that I'm still recording because, technology, key moments that happened this year. And then I'm going to get out y'all hair. As I said, in 2024, I celebrated a year of intentionally walking with God. And I also got rebaptized to celebrate that milestone. I'm pretty sure I shared with y'all before. I had been baptized before, prior to 2024, but I was maybe like 10, 11, 12 years old, I think, like sometime like around then, like somewhere around that age. And so I was old enough to know, like what I was doing and, why it was important and, all of the things. But again, like I've just been journeying through, just wrestling with my faith. And so now that I'm at a more secure place within my faith, as I've been, understanding God for myself in a real way and not just having a knowing of, who God is, but, actually like knowing God for myself. I just felt as an adult, it was necessary and it was important for me to get rebaptized. And so that was something that I did. And then too, in the year of 2024, I read through the entire Bible for the second time. I've read through the entire Bible before. This was some years ago, but again, who and where I was then is not who and where I now am. And so it was intentional. It was important for me to be intentional about reading through the Bible in a year again this year, as I also wanted to be, of course, intentional about just being consistent and being in my word. So shout out to my girl Jo for blessing me with this Bible in a year plan. It was this notebook, devotional journal with like prompts in it that she gifted me with at the end of 2023. And I was so grateful. I was like, oh girl, I can't wait to start this at the top of the year. Yes. And so, yeah, that helped a lot. And so shout out to my girl, Jo. If you want to know, like what the book is called, or if you want a link to the book, just let me know and I will definitely give that to you. This year I also built some meaningful connections through godly community, and that was an answered prayer, because I'm like, God, if I'm going to be on this journey of intentionally growing closer to you, like, can you bless me with some relationships with other people my age, who look like me, who are also on this journey? Because I have a church home, but it's not a lot of people present at that church who are my age. And I'm in my 20s. A lot of us are not in the place of wanting to grow closer to God, and so I'm just like, God, can you please bless me with the people who I can have alongside me as I'm on this journey? And God definitely answered that prayer. And I am a part of multiple communities that is full of people, my age, and, are holding me accountable and, are supportive and encouraging and all of the things. And I am so grateful. So shout out to all of y'all. Y'all know who y'all are. As I said, this year I deepened my understanding of God's character and his plans for my life, solidifying my faith. And so, of course, that was important to me. I would say like that's like the definition of this year, really. I also saw With the Perrys in Chicago. If you know, if you are needing a podcast recommendation that is faith-based, I am a fan of With the Perrys, and they went on a podcast tour, and they were in Chicago in June of 2024, and I was able to go. And even me being able to go was an answered prayer, because I was reaching out to people who I knew, like, hey, would you like for me? Or reaching out to people who I would know. I reached out to people who I knew would be interested in going. And I remember at first it was looking like I was going to have to go by myself. But I'm like, if I go by myself, it's just going to be more expensive. And I'm like, I really don't got the money for all of that. And then, then it had sold out. So then, the people who I had asked, they wasn't able to grab a ticket. And then long story short, they ended up putting more tickets for sale, and the people who I asked, they were able to go with me, and so I didn't go by myself, and it ended up being cheaper. And yeah, like even that was an answered prayer. So yeah, me being able to go see with the Perrys in Chicago, that was definitely a highlight of my year. That same month, I had saw Isaiah Rashad in concert. He was on tour for the 10-year anniversary of Sylvia Demo. That was a highlight. I love me some Isaiah Rashad. If I'm being honest though, I have been in a place where I haven't been listening to a whole lot of music. If it isn't my own, if it hasn't been, gospel, jazz, instrumental, like I know God has definitely been dealing with me regarding my taste in music and what I'm listening to and what's coming in my ear gates. But yeah, I definitely enjoyed that concert. I also graduated from the 2 Degrees entrepreneurial program. It's a program here in the city that provides mentorship and resources towards or for entrepreneurs. That's something that I joined at the end of 2023, and in 2024 I graduated from that program, and I'm definitely grateful for that program because it helped me to just see what I'm doing as more of a brand, right? Like what I'm doing is not a hobby, and I have a personal brand, and so I should be moving as a business. And yeah, they helped me to how can I put it into words? They helped me refine what my business model could be, like what success could look like within what it is I'm currently doing. And so yeah, and then of course that brought connections and community as well. So definitely grateful for that. I cut my hair in 2024. If you know, I have always been known for how long my hair is, and my hair is currently up right now, but it's literally like shoulder length, and that's a big deal because prior to cutting it this short, I was sitting on my locks. I have always had long hair, and so how short my hair is right now, that's a pretty big deal. And yeah, I just felt like that was worth noting because so many people were shocked that I did it, and I'm still shocked that I did it. I low-key kind of regret it sometimes because I do like the look and the aesthetic of long hair. However, I know my identity was wrapped up within the length of my hair in an unhealthy way as well. And also too, the locks were heavy, literally and like just spiritually, and I just felt like I just needed to cut some dead weight. So that's why I did it. I kind of wanted to see myself differently and get to a place of just loving myself regardless, and not just being wrapped up in vanity and how long my hair is. And yeah, so that was a thing. I was booked for my first speaking engagement. I spoke at UIndy, and that was something that I did not at all see coming. And it was a full circle moment, really, because although I went to Ball State all 4 years and I graduated from Ball State, even though I have on a Purdue shirt, I actually had a full ride to go to UIndy, but I couldn't see myself at UIndy. I went to Ball State and I was like, this is where I feel like I need to be. But knowing that I had a full ride to go to UIndy, and then here in 2024, I was booked to speak at UIndy and essentially just share my journey. The title of my talk, if you will, was Faith in Finding Your Footing. And so I essentially was just sharing my story of just me navigating my faith, as well as, my artistry and how I've been able to balance that, as a college student, what life looks like now for me, now that, college is out the way, and I was really just able to just provide, some wisdom and some inspiration for those who are still, attending, college, at UIndy. And yeah, I'm grateful because I'm like, now that I'm a paid speaker now, add that to my resume. And I was also booked to perform All-Star Weekend, which I am grateful for because All-Star Weekend was hosted here in my hometown, my home city of Indianapolis, and that was a pretty big deal. So I am grateful. However, going back to me speaking on the fact that I kind of was like going through like an identity shift, or like, an identity crisis, and I'm experiencing, the grace lifting and, shifting and all of the things. Yeah, that was during that time. And so I don't know how, things were perceived by other people, but I know me personally, that wasn't my best show. And yeah, like that performance was very uncomfortable for me to do, because that was when I literally felt like I was resisting the pivot that God wanted me to make. So I literally was saying like, okay, like after this show, I can't do another show. But yeah, so like whenever I think back on that weekend and that show in particular, I'm like, that was such an uncomfortable period of time for me spiritually, but I am grateful for that opportunity. But yeah, also I started to improve my credit this year. I got my own credit card, and I ain't gonna tell y'all my credit score, but my credit score been going up a little bit, so I noted that as a win, as a highlight. I'm proud of myself for that. Of course, as I've said before, I've been consistent in showing up for this podcast. If I counted correctly, I have released 16 episodes, both audio and visual, and that's a pretty big deal because it's both audio and visual, and it's just me. So yeah. I also performed at the state fair for the first time. And not only did I perform at the state fair for the first time, I performed at the state fair with a band for the first time. Listen, as a little girl who has gone to the fair, I don't know how many times, that was a big deal. And since the very beginning, like from the very beginning of me pursuing music, I told myself, if I'm gonna do this, I want to be a real artist. I want to be a real musician. And for me, that looked like me having live instrumentation and performing with the band. And so it's been a long time coming, long story short, but I'm so grateful that I finally got to perform with the band, and I also got to perform at the fair for the first time. And y'all, when I tell you I was on cloud 9, like I performed at an early enough time so where after I performed, I was able to still like enjoy the fair. And y'all, like I was riding on them rides, and I was just, you feel me, real big kid energy. Like what? Like as a kid, like I used to come here all the time, and now I'm performing here at the fair, and I just performed with a band, and that's something that I've always wanted to do. Like that probably was like my, like that probably was like the highlight for me. So shout out to Treese, shout out to Butter, and shout out to Treese specifically, because Treese is always, you feel me, alley-ooping, and you feel me, looking out. Treese always take care of me. So yeah. Also too though, just shout out to my city. Shout out to everyone who presents me with amazing opportunities that are in alignment with who I am. And I am so grateful to have a city that embraces me and supports me and, you know, like champions me and respects me. And that's a huge deal, because if you're an artist and your own city don't embrace you and, like, you feel me, rock with you, I don't even really know what to say, right? But like I'm just so grateful that, you feel me, like my own city rock with me and embrace me. That's so important to me, because I think a lot of us artists, you know, we have these big goals of, you know, winning Grammys and, you know, all of these things. But like for me, Like it genuinely means like so much more to me to know that I'm supported and I'm embraced by my own city, and to know that I'm also documented, a part of the history as far as like the hip hop culture here in the city. Like that means a whole lot to me too. So shout out to Jake with the Shot. I had the amazing opportunity of being a part of his project titled Visual Oral. It's a mixtape / photo book. He photographed me, and I got to be a part of something bigger than myself. And yeah, my song, a part of the mixtape, is titled Affirmations, and that is the only single that I dropped in 2024. But that single was a part of something bigger than itself, and I literally just had intentions of just dropping that single. So again, shout out to Jake. Visual Oral out now, mixtape, photo book, and we also had a release show, and I was one of the 3 artists selected to perform for the release show. And the release show was actually the weekend of my birthday, so you couldn't tell me it wasn't meant. I'm like, wow, this is definitely God's timing, perfect timing. Like I was so grateful to be a part of that. I also invested in myself through doing a personal brand shoot, and I launched a new website, and you can find on that website pictures from that shoot. But I also invest in myself through applying for a podcast cohort, and not only did I get accepted into that cohort, but I also got a scholarship. I received a scholarship. I won a scholarship for that cohort. And I am grateful because I am seeing what God is doing with this podcast specifically. But also shout out to Miss Wendy, because again, God's timing is perfect. But she will tell you, I harassed that lady for I don't know how long. Like, me getting accepted into that cohort was literally an answered prayer, because I had been wanting to be a part of that program. And the fact that I finally got accepted in 2024, like, the timing couldn't have been more perfect. So yeah. And then speaking of podcasts, I was a guest on not one but 2 podcasts. Shout out to Lead Your Lineage as well as Conversation Piece. And if I gotta be honest, my interview with Conversation Piece with Patrick, that is my favorite interview that I have done thus far. If you have not tuned in to both, make sure you go do that. But Conversation Piece specifically, shout out to Patrick. That was such a good interview. That was such a great conversation that we had. And I have so much respect for him and the work that he does. But yeah, I also hosted 2 events. And with that said, I also mentioned in my interview with Patrick for Conversation Piece that I want to start doing more events. And so event planning and event curation, that's about to be added to my resume as well. And I'm very excited about it because I've also been working on cultivating a very intentional community through event curation. And so that is a look into 2025. This has been my 2024. I am grateful for those of you who have been on this journey with me. I pray that you continue to be on this journey with me. And once again, let me know how y'all 2024 was. Let me know what y'all looking forward to in 2025. Let me know what y'all would want to see more of from me specifically in the work that I do. And I will see y'all in the next episode. Bye. I love y'all. Also, really quick, because I be terrible with these little ending messages. If I did not already say it, or if I did not say it enough, I am grateful for all of you. As I'm closing out the year, I just wanted to give My gratitude, my gratitude, my gratitude to all of you. Anyone who has played a role in my year of 2024. Gratitude. And with that said, I got to give y'all call to actions because I'll be forgetting that too. Please make sure you follow the podcast on social media at Keys Exceeds Pod, keysexceeds.com. Check out the new website, subscribe to the newsletter, meet me in the comments as I said, subscribe, leave a rating, leave a review, and yeah, I think that's all for right now, for real. All right, I'm out. I love y'all.